Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone, and welcome to our first Pride Brunch, which is going to kick off all of the Variant Roles community games and events for June, which is Pride Month. It's also the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. So today we've got some wonderful guests here that we're going to hear from. A couple quick things before we get started. First of all, there will be Pride events going on all this month. On Saturdays today, we will have our Pride brunch. And then on Tuesdays, I believe it's 6 p.m., 6 p.m. Eastern, we will also have some community games. So definitely follow Variant Roles on Twitter to keep abreast of all of that. And then there's a bunch of really wonderful new games happening this month, which I will talk about a little later on. Also, I want to point out that we are tracking donations this month. All of the bits that are donated, all donations, which actually, if you look way down below where the Variant Roles logo is, if you click on that, that will take you to a donation screen as well. All of those will be going to Trans Lifeline this month, which is a 501c3 organization that provides direct services, material support, advocacy, and education for trans folks. They're also the first ever trans support line, and they do really amazing and important work. So let's get started. My name is Emma. I should have said that earlier, but I didn't. And I use she, her pronouns. And Corey, why don't you tell us about yourself and what you've got going on this month?
Yeah, my name is Corey. My pronouns are he, they. I currently have a Pride donut that I'm really excited about. Segueing on the charity that we're supporting, starting today, I've been working on a couple games called the Pride Collection, and I'll link that in a second. All purchases for the Pride Collection are going to be donated to the Trans Lifeline. So in addition to that, there's a whole bunch of cool ways you can donate, and you can get games out of it as well. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you. Why don't we swing around over to Anders?
Hi, I'm Anders. I just ate a donut. It's fine. I use he, him pronouns, and I am going to be playing in a bunch of little games here on Variant Roles this month for Pride, and hopefully going to play some Pride stuff over on my own channel, which is Hats, Cats, and Clerics. Haven't quite figured all those details out yet, but I will let you know when I do.
Awesome. And Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen, she, her pronouns. You can find me on the internet at Redibly Generated on the Twitch. I'm doing a ton of stuff for Pride this month. I'm working with game company Midboss to do a Summer of Pride event. So we're playing tons of games. There's a great community, whole bunch of great streamers getting together and doing that. And I stream 4 or 5 days a week regardless. And a lot of our games this month are Pride themed. Got lots of stuff going on.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I guess on Pride Brunch, we will sometimes talk about games. Sometimes we will talk about other stuff, but it will always be centered around LGBTQIA+ voices and experiences. So why don't we start off with, since it is Pride, why don't we spend some time sort of unpacking Pride? What does it mean to you? Have you been to Pride? What was your first Pride like? What are some of the things that sort of what does it mean to you? And there's a variety of things that it can mean. And anybody can sort of jump in here since we're just having brunch and talking.
I can start if no one else is gonna jump onto it. Okay, so I mean, my first Pride. So our city has our local Pride parade, and the first time I went, I was like on the fence about it. I didn't have anyone that I was planning on going with. I was kind of nervous. I was like, I've never done this before. What do I do? But it ended up being a weird case where I had a work event before, and I ended up being so late that I didn't actually make it on time. So I just like went for the after part. I was like, ah, cool, there's like a market and stuff. But then the next year, which I actually attended the parade, I went with my boyfriend and we met some people there. And it was a lot. Once I got there, I was like, oh, this is actually really fun and I enjoy it. And I was much less nervous because I was really nervous. I don't know why. Doing stuff for the first time. But yeah, so that was my like first experience with Pride, really, was going with my boyfriend for reals to the parade and actually making it.
I think that also something that I hear a lot are that a lot of people have sort of like some anxieties about going to like their first Pride, or like even just attending Pride like second or third year. There's always sort of some anxieties behind that. And it's sort of different for everyone in the community. Jen or Anders, do either of you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I was terrified to go to Pride because I am not out to my family and like my local community. And the only reason I ever actually went the first time is I was doing right after high school, a production of Rent over the summer. And the theater said, hey, let's have the whole cast march in Pride and sing Rent songs because, you know, Rent is such a queer icon of a musical. And so we had to go to Pride. And it was like this great excuse. Like I was like, oh, hey, family, I'm going to Pride, but it's for this. And I've gone since and just kind of not really talked about it to anyone. But I don't know.
It definitely associated with the having to find a reason to go for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I couldn't just go. I needed some excuse or opening to let myself go.
Sometimes it's nice when you have that much sort of like anxiety behind it to have something that sort of just pushes you to do it. Sometimes they can make it worse, but sometimes you have that experience where it's sort of like, well, I have to do this thing. And then you go and you realize, okay, this is all right. This is okay. We're doing okay. Jen, what about you?
So I've never been to a Pride event. Of course, sorry, there's lawn people outside and they keep going right past my window every time I try to talk. Every time. So I've never been to a Pride event. I'm fairly asocial and just like get right and easy. I'd like to go someday, but I like don't have anyone to go with currently. All of my like queer community that I know is pretty much online. I have a few friends in the queer space IRL, but they're like super busy adult people with children and all. That's sort of the problem of being close to 30 is all your friends are old as well. So I'd like to go at some point if I can find the reason and maybe someone or someones to go with. That would be cool. Because also I'm fairly recently, like I didn't know I was bi until I was in my late 20s, and I knew I was demisexual fairly early on. Like as soon as I learned the word, I was like, oh, there's a word for it. Mm-hmm. But like in my brain with all that, like, oh, being on the A spectrum, oh, you're not queer enough for that. So like I've never, been the last few years that I've been like, oh yeah, Pride as fuck.
Yeah, which I think actually sort of leads me into the next question, which is sort of about thinking about queer validation and sort of like not feeling queer enough, not feeling welcome in queer spaces, and sort of unpacking that and what that's like. Because I know that outside of the community, there's a lot of erasure that goes on, but even within the community, it's like, actually, I was talking with Matthew not too long ago, who's in chat, and he was like, there's not like a gay litmus test. And yet so many of us feel like there is. So anybody want to spend some time sort of unpacking that and how that feels and what that's like?
I was going to mention really quick, Emma, did you want to talk about your first Pride?
Of course, Em.
Oh, I mean, I can. I'm also sort of like, I want to make sure that like your voices, like I'm here for you guys. So, or you people, you folks should practice gender inclusive language. But I think like I've been a couple of times, and I went last year with one of my friends, and it was like it was lovely. I would really like to go to the one in New York City. I'm always working during June, so it's really hard for me to get down there, but that's sort of like on my bucket list of going down there and going to Stonewall. And like, you know, the historical piece is always what is most important to me, and honoring all of those queens that really put their lives on the line to exist. And I think that that is so important, and that we can never forget that. And I think that, you know, it's always important to remember that the first Pride was a riot. So that's like one of the most important things for me. That's like what Pride means to me, is honoring and remembering that experience and struggles.
I do have one more thing, because I live in Texas right now, so that's another reason I'm like, maybe I'll wait until I move back north to go to Pride, of course, again. But the other thing, Pride, even though I've been to a Pride event, the month of doing all the Pride is so important to me as someone who has my community mostly online, especially like with the event I'm doing and stuff. I've met so many Pride associated people, because like very recently, I've been streaming off and on Twitch for like 4 years, more often off than on, and I was on the verge of quitting again right before. I was like, once again with the, I'm not good enough, why does anyone want to watch me do this? And then I started this event, and I've gotten so much support from the community, from the roleplay community, from the queer community, that I was like, yeah, I can do this, I'm worth something, people are enjoying this. I like having that community is so important, and I think having Pride Month is so important for us to like recenter on that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Pride Month is a great way if you're thinking about coming out to certain people. That's what I did last year with my stepdad. Was I said, hey, you know, it's Pride Month. Like, yeah, you can kind of gauge how they feel about that. If they say, oh, screw the gay, and if they go off, or like, oh yeah, cool, and then you're like, by the way, I'm a part of Pride Month because I'm insert this. If you're looking for a casual way to slide into that on certain people that you maybe don't need to make an event of coming out. So thought I'd bring that up.
Well, I think that that's a really good point, that sometimes gauging is using Pride to sort of gauge how it might unravel or not. That's a really good point.
One of the best things that's happened for me recently was, so my dad started working for the YMCA, and in the last couple of years, at least our branch has begun marching in Pride. And I'm not out to my dad, and we've never really talked about it, and he's generally more conservative than he is liberal, and so I've always been kind of worried about having that conversation. And last year he invited me to walk in Pride, the YMCA, and he walked too. And it was like, okay, this is a huge step, and it's helped me start to build the courage to have that conversation. And so I think public events like Pride can be really helpful for people to, you know, gain that courage. Definitely.
I completely agree, and that made me tear up.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, like I'm gonna cry by the end of this.
You're doing really great, everybody. So anyway, next question: queer validation. Anybody want to pick up on that?
I will just say that we're all valid, everyone.
Word.
That's right.
Queer tears.
Queer tears. That's
Queer
right.
tears.
I think also that feeling that queer validation, I think, is connected to something that Jen brought up, which is sort of like online spaces, and how that can help you sort of find your validation and find yourself and find your communities. So there's so many things to talk about. Okay. So how let's sort of take some time to unpack the concept of like not feeling queer enough or being in queer spaces and not feeling like you belong.
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with a lot of that. I think it's just a lot of general imposter syndrome that a lot of us, most of us, hopefully all of us feel, but hopefully don't feel, but hopefully feel, because it makes us all we all feel like we don't belong in the places that we do at certain times sometimes. And like I feel that a lot with various things, like not feeling queer enough, not feeling disabled enough because I don't look queer enough or don't act, or because a lot of times, less so nowadays, but in the past, it's being bi or ace, people will be like, oh, you're not part, like there was a thing because you could potentially be in a heteronormative looking relationship, like, oh, you don't understand. It's like bi erasure and ace erasure within the community. It's gotten a lot better, but you still have occasional times where you run into someone and you wonder if they're going to be like, especially I'm biromantic demisexual, and those are two words that a lot of people just don't know what mean. They've never heard of before. So yeah. I think as the community expands and more people speak out, I feel more like queer enough.
There's a culture that's developed that I've witnessed, and it's a pretty toxic culture of claiming that younger generations are picking up these terms, making up these labels, all to, feel special and feel unique. And I mean, it's a terrible mindset that, we have these words because we just want to be, part of the party. And yet there's also the, it's important to feel special and unique aspect of it. And sorry, I'm rambling in circles. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's this mindset that young kids are, trying to fit in by coming out, and how that's a bad thing, when in reality it's just we're making safer places and we're coming up with more labels to help more people feel included, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing. And it's not this, negative, horrible, and that mindset doesn't just come from the outside, it comes from the inside, which is one of the worst parts of it,
Yeah, internalized queer phobia to extent. But yeah, there's that whole I forgot the words I was going to use. It's early. I've been sick all week. I'm sorry. My brain is not on executive function, not my strong suit today.
Okay, back to you.
I was just thinking along the same lines. In like the tabletop space, a lot of times when I'm playing games and stuff, I always think about like the language that games use, because that's like a really important of how your game presents. But I always find myself like bouncing from like the games that languages use, like the games that queer people use, and like I find they're very like tightly connected in how, people are just coming up with new ways to sort of properly describe and include all the different parts they are. And like within those two spots, I always find myself like, I can't think about one without the other. And they also like help me think about each other, really. Thinking about queer things helps sort of like build up how I think about tabletop games, and how I think about tabletop games, influences how I think about queer stuff as well.
You ever, I know I'm not our moderator, but
no, please jump in, please.
Do you ever feel like when you're doing stream content or, public content where you're, placing yourself in front of an audience's eye, that you have defense mechanisms or things built up to, say, this is who I am? Like, I know for me, often when I stream and I'm not familiar with the channel, or I'm just not sure who's going to be watching, I tend to play female presenting characters because I've had games in the past where people have, misgendered me pretty much the whole time because I don't sound male enough. I don't know. I wonder if that's maybe just a me thing that I do, or if you guys have experienced something like that too.
No, I definitely do. With on my own channel, I have sort of a, like, I've got great mods and stuff, but that's part of why I didn't, for so many of the 4 years I've been streaming, I didn't stream, is because I was terrified of having those interactions with chat or having someone come in and start spewing nonsense and garbage. And also I have a tendency to, when I'm in that sort of fight or flight or freeze situation, I either freeze or I get real fighty. Like, I will tell everyone to just F all the way off and get real angry. And I'm like, I don't like that. That's what you want from me. Otherwise, or I'll freeze and just like, what are words? How do words work? How do I get out of this situation? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think the freeze as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I think also the other thing is like trying to ensure that if you're unsure if the space itself is safe, then you have to like create your own safe space. Like you create this little bubble like right around yourself to ensure that like that you're not presenting in a way that could potentially bring up something that might hurt you, either mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and sort of realizing how often you have those defense mechanisms up without actually, like, it becomes habit, unfortunately, that you just sort of like create these habits for yourself that don't necessarily honor who you are.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah, and you don't like honor your experience. And it can be oh, Anders, that's a shame. You need mimosas.
Yeah, I didn't wake up soon enough to go buy alcohol. So I bought coffee instead.
That's important though. So yeah, that is the mimosa. I don't know what I'm I got derailed by alcohol.
Doesn't it always happen like that?
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. So how about going back to sort of like who was someone? Oh,
I'll share. I leave these 2 bottles of whiskey in my desk.
Oh my! I think we just learned something about Jen here.
It's a little low. 1 12-year-old scotch.
Ooh,
we fancy, huh?
That's right.
Nice.
Also, I think that something that sort of comes up a lot, I know at least in my experience, is the idea of like, there's always erasure that exists outside of the community, but in the community, and this goes totally into like that, going back to that idea of like suddenly people feel like suddenly there are all of these identities that exist and thinking like, what is this? Why is this suddenly fashionable or whatever? And when the reality is just, no, now we have names for these things. Now we have these identities. These identities have existed for thousands of, since the dawn of time.
That was what I was trying to say before, and I forgot. The whole idea that there's more queer people now. It's like, no, there's always been this many or maybe more queer people. They just didn't know or couldn't come out. Or like, when you look back on history now that we've got a more queer lens to our modern perspective, there's tons of historical trans people and like everyone that's, these spinsters were the best of friends. No, they were lesbians. They were in a relationship. They loved each other. You just wanted them to just be spinster friends living together. Like, yeah. It's so like there's this idea that there's so many queer people now. It's like, no, there's always been a bunch of us. We just couldn't. We're just safer to come out now in a lot of places, but not in all places, which is unfortunate still.
Well, and it reminds me, there was a time at one of it was the very first year that I ran my summer camp, and as part of the summer camp, we have a lot of discussions about like gender identity, sexuality, and there was we do pronouns on the first day, and there was a young girl there who said that she used she/her pronouns, but she wasn't really sure how she felt about that.
Feel that.
And yeah, and then so I brought in a couple of high school students who were part of the LGBTQ community to just sort of talk to all the campers about their experiences and their identities. And this young man shared that he sort of likes gender bending and that he can be a bit androgynous, but he still prefers he, him pronouns. And she was like, wait, what does androgynous mean? And he explained it to her, and she was like, that's me. That makes sense to me. And it was like this really beautiful moment where suddenly she was starting to figure out her identity, and in this really safe space, which not everyone is afforded. But being able to find that thing that you say, oh, that's me, that makes sense to me, I think is important. Have any of you had like a moment like that for yourself or with a friend?
This was actually with a teacher, and I think having just teachers in general who, offer spaces for their students to, tell them their pronouns and things is just really super important. I say this as someone with an education degree, and that's a whole other thing. But I was in my senior year of college, and we had an adjunct professor come in to do a like technology in the art classroom sort of class that we all had to take to get our major. And he was a pretty cool guy, and he asked us what pronouns we wanted on the first class. And I'd never had anyone ask me that before, ever. And I thought, she, her, right? That seems right. And then I spent that entire semester going, no, wait, no, that does not feel right at all. So I switched with that professor to they, them. And then within a few months of graduating, kind of like figured myself out. And if it hadn't been for that teacher giving me an opportunity to really like think about it and even just consider it, I don't think I'd ever have put all the pieces together. And I mean, that just reflects back to the validation thing, because sometimes I feel like I'm not trans enough because I didn't know my whole life. I didn't know until college. I didn't figure it out until recently. And I'm like, some people are like, I've always been male. And I'm like, I don't know if that's not the phrase I would use for myself. So it's all a big jumble, I guess. At least my words are a jumble.
No,
Words are fine.
Your words aren't a jumble at all. That was like
It's beautiful.
Yeah. What about the rest of you? You two.
Yeah, I was a very androgynous child. I got misgendered all the time. Like, I was born bald, so I've been misgendered since I was literally, as my mom always got, oh, what a cute little boy. Oh, what a cute little boy. She got my ears pierced. She dressed me in all pink still. What a cute little boy. Don't know why. But I always wore boys' clothes, and all that. I was always sort of misgendered. And that always made me feel weird, because I didn't mind when people called me boy, because I'm fairly gender fluid. I say she, her, but I don't mind any pronouns. All pronouns are fine for me. That's why I think it's easier whenever I play characters that differentiate from my gender identity in that particular moment. Like, I play lots of male characters in D&D and stuff sometimes, because I like to be able to feel that part of my identity that I don't necessarily get to express much, because I've only recently sort of like embraced the femme bits of my body, which it was very hard to not do for a long time because I'm a D cup. So I would always, big shirts, push it down without binding, but as close as you get, sports bras and all that. But yeah, and finding like identities, like sexual identities or romantic identities. The first time I saw demisexual was on a Tumblr post, I think. And I read the description of it and I was like, oh, I was probably in my mid-20s. I was like, well, that explains, I've never been on a date before. That explains all of these things. I feel so validated. And then eventually same sort of ideal coming around whenever bisexual, pansexual, and the idea that surrounds all of that. So yeah, I've had several of those come to queerness moments where I'm just like, I feel like understanding those labels about yourself. You don't need the labels, but knowing the labels and being able to identify yourself has so much that it can like just give you peace of mind in your own mind and heart. That it's super great whenever you can find that. And I might not be done finding those, and I'll be like, I understand myself even more, and I'm almost 29 years old. Keep on understanding myself on deeper levels.
Yeah, I think that evolution of understanding yourself is like this kind of never-ending quest to continue to figure parts of yourselves out in a variety of different ways, whether it's your mental health or your physical appearance or your gender identity, your sexuality, any number of things. You know, the list is endless of that and figuring yourself out. Corey, what about you?
Yeah. So I've had like a bunch of thoughts go off since we actually asked the question. So my answer is probably going to be like
That's okay.
straying off the path. But I remember in kindergarten, so a bit of a story time. My class had these really weird ideas of like which colors were for which gender. Um, at least looking back to me, it's weird. But for example, like purple and pink were the more feminine colors. And I, going into kindergarten, I didn't know this. Had no concept of this. But I really enjoyed drawing stuff using shades of purple to indigo. I was like, I really enjoyed those colors in kindergarten. So I drew a picture once. It was just like me shading from those colors. I was like, this looks really nice. And someone was like, why are you using those colors? I was like, I don't know. And then they like enforced it on me that it was not okay to use colors that weren't for me. And that was the first time where I was like, I guess I should maybe, not be doing this. And that, yeah, exactly. And so that was way back when. But so that was like a lot of my life up until my 20s, I would say. And then in my 20s, I'm 27 now, just for context. I started when I came out and started dating guys. I remember at my work, I was sort of like, I don't really know what is best for me. And there's one other gay guy at work who I chatted with. We always had DMs to each other and it was just like chatting about different queer things, different, if we went on like dates with people, like how that went and stuff. I was like, oh, this is cool. And I feel like between those two spots, it was like so much of a difference in who I was. But jumping back to the idea of like validation, it wasn't until like within the last year at our work that we started a queer channel, which essentially brought in anyone who wanted to be within the queer space or who was an ally. And we started doing like events together. And that was a really big thing where I was like, oh, these people are a lot like me and are similar to me. And we have like similar fears and anxieties. And that was really important for being like, oh, I can actually be in this space and that's okay. And just like thinking about going back to my kindergarten self where it was like, oh, don't use those colors. You're not supposed to, because made up rules that are pointless. So, yeah.
Thinking back, I think I'm feeling a lot like thinking about those kinds of experiences I've definitely had as well, where this is for you, you should be doing this. A lot of times I remember at Bible camp or whatever, summer vacation Bible school, when I was maybe 7, 8, I didn't want to wear a top when we went for bathing suit day. And I had 2 other people with me that were girls that they were like, why do we need, the boys can run around without the top. What is this top bathing suit doing for me? I was not anywhere near puberty. That was being enforced on me. Like, what's going on here? But lots of those little situations and things like that pop up in my mind where this isn't, it's not for you. That's not how you should do this. Society's little.
Just yesterday at work, because I work with little kids and I'm a nanny, I overheard the parent tell one of the little girls, okay, well, we can change out here in the hallway just now because there's only girls around. But with daddy's home, you can't change anywhere but your room or the bathroom. And I went, the child is 4. Like, what is this? Why do we? It was just the weirdest sort of, one, sexualizing of your child. 2, like, that's her dad. It should
Predatorization of men in general.
It was so weird, and I didn't say anything because I didn't know how to react. I was just like, what? It was, yeah.
I had the reverse experience too, Jen, where I was at my best friend. I grew up with her since I was 4, and I used to go to her birthday parties and stuff. I was really confused why everyone else had to wear tops, and as a guy, I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
So I would like hold my towel up, and I was like, why am I not doing this? And this just reminded me of that.
Which actually kind of brings me to another idea, and I'm trying to, this was a post that I made a while ago in a group that I'm an admin for. It brings me to the binary, the dreaded, awful, worst creation ever, binary.
Except in computers.
Except in computers.
Then that's where it belongs, and that's where it should stay.
That's right. And how we have built this whole culture on the binary, and it spans well beyond, masculine, feminine, male, female, boy, girl, whatever. And that we've established this system for literally every aspect of our lives. That
colors.
Yeah, for colors, that, colors are suddenly split into 2 things, which goes back to what you were talking about, Corey. And also that, when you think of a doctor, what is the first image that comes to your mind? And for a lot, particularly young kids, they think of a man. And then when you think of like a truck driver, or when you think of a ballet dancer, or when you think of a nurse or a teacher, and all of these descriptors and stereotypes are split into binary. And how hard it is once you're aware of it and you realize, oh, this is every part of my life. Like, have any of you had to, like, what kind of work have you had to do to sort of unpack the binary and like retrace some steps and rethink some experiences that you had that were quite damaging, that we've heard from all of you, whether it's something you saw or something you experienced, and sort of learning to unpack that and how that journey has been?
I could kick us off unless someone else wants to.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah. So the first thing I thought of when thinking about this was jumping back to when I first started playing tabletop games. Because you've got a choice when you make a character, where is their gender as you play your character. And my very first group I started with was my close friends. I was GMing though. And as a GM, it's almost different. You get to play characters you get to play many characters, so you're playing all across the gender spectrum there. And that was the first time where I was like, maybe there is like a balance to like the masculine and feminine side that I have, and all the parts that are in between that and around that. And I know for me personally, when it comes down to like making characters as a player, I typically have 2 characters. And they if I try and make a new character, they always fall back into the 2 characters. And like the more I've thought about it, the more I sort of like realize the 2 characters really split up into some of the masculine characteristics, as some of the feminine characteristics that I feel like are a part of me. And so I've always thought through like gaming that's helped me think about it and just realize what all is there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have a mouthful of donuts, so whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
So I grew up as a little ballerina. I danced when I was like 3-year-old. I did it all the way through middle school, and didn't stop until I kind of like hit puberty and started to have all these body issues of not being as small as the other kids, and I've now as an adult gone back and looked and been like, oh, also probably it was the trans thing. That was probably a big part of that body issue stuff, but I didn't realize it at the time. But I remember quitting dance and going through the quintessential, I hate pink, I hate dresses, I hate everything that is associated with being girly. And, I came out as a lesbian, which I now know is incorrect. But at the time I was like, I'm queer, so this has to be what I am, right? Right, perfect. And just like totally hated everything feminine. And I'm now realizing, oh, I actually really like dresses, and makeup's really cool. And oh, pink is a beautiful color. And I'm like, but now I'm a guy and I'm trans. And so that makes me less trans. And it's this whole weird mumble of wanting to fit into the mold of what you identify as versus like the roles that are presented, like, and the genders that are placed on objects. And even now I'm like, gender is stupid and objects don't have gender, but I should get men's deodorant, right? I should shop in the male section for men's deodorant because I'm a guy. But that stuff smells better. So it's so weird. Why do things have to have genders? They're just things.
Yeah, I'm wearing men's cologne right now. I don't want to smell like flowers. I want to smell like whiskey and oak. Why can't a woman smell like whiskey and oak? That's what my cologne is. But yeah, I feel you with a lot of that. I rejected pink outright whenever I was, till I was probably 20 something, because I was like, nope, no, not gonna, nope, get out of here, girl things. But the idea that like they have these things have gender that doesn't make any sense at all it's taxing on my brain. But also I've had to deal with some stuff within my religion type things. I'm a Nordic druidic witch, and there's a lot of the polarity of gender within a lot of paganism, but it's also very open to the exploration therein. But there is the like, this is the masculine and this is the feminine sort of thing. And I've dealt with that kind of stuff. I did communications in school, and any kind of psychology class or anything. These are masculine behaviors. I do that. Well, but this is true. But that's how I sit, and that's how I talk, and these are feminine. I've never done that in my life. Well, this is like arguing with professors about masculine and feminine and how the whole notion of it is somewhat absurd, because it's like stereotypes that we're feeding into. And a lot of times I feel like they persist because we allow them to persist.
Yeah. I mean, I am more feminine now as a trans man than I was before I knew what my gender was. And like every day I have to like tell myself, nope, you're still male. Even if you like these, it's okay to like these things.
You're valid
AF. Any less, it's, yeah, it's all just it's a struggle.
It's such a struggle. And I remember in college, I have been obsessed with like makeup and, the color pink and all the stuff that society has decided is feminine or female or whatever. And as a result of that, I was never like queer enough. So like anytime, and but it happened like within the community. So, which is unfortunate, but that speaks to, not just because you're in a marginalized community doesn't mean that you've done all the work and the unpacking that can go with that. And I will never forget, there I was in like this very cute sundress. I had all this makeup on, my hair was done, and I asked this young woman on a date, and her friends were sitting next to her. It was a lesbian couple, and they were like, "Oh, honey, she's straight. Like, you really shouldn't do that. That's a really bad idea." And I was like, "Oh, maybe I don't belong here then." And so all of this, like, binary stuff and what society has decided is this or that goes all the way back to that idea of like queer validation. Do I belong here? Do I not? Because it's still those ideas of like, if I'm this, then I can't be this, instead of realizing that like this is a spectrum and a rainbow, and all of these experiences are A, valid, and B, completely different. So it's a journey.
The idea that you can look at somebody and say, "Oh no, that person is straight," is just ludicrous to me, because it's like you can look at what appears to be a heteronormative couple, and you don't know if one or both of those people are bi or pan or even trans, if they're choosing to present their transness in the binary sort of way. Like the idea that we gotta gatekeep the queer community because they're not enough is just like, why? We've been gatekeeping for so long, and from so many other places. Why are we now going to do it? Because like I didn't know I was bi until much later in my life thus far, and I think if I would have felt more accepted in certain parts of queer community, I might have been able to pick up on it faster because I would have seen it represented around me.
We as a community definitely need to do a better job of creating openly accepting spaces that provide, education and, resources to everyone, because it's not just our own that need these resources. It's, people who don't know if they're a member of the community or not, people who aren't a member of the community, and we need to teach them about, who we are so that they can be better educated. We need to make spaces that are, friendly for young kids in the community. I mean, I live in Indianapolis, and the only queer spaces are bars. That's it.
Yeah.
That is the only place you can go in this city where there is a rainbow flag hanging in the window. And it's like, what about young kids? I mean, we do have a youth group for younger kids, but when I was young and like found out about it, it felt very exclusive. Like you had to be a friend with people already involved to be able to join. It was more like just a popular friend group than a place that welcomed everyone. And it might be different now. I don't know. That was just my initial intake of it as a young kid. So I just think we need more spaces. We need more places that are open to everyone.
And inviting straight people, allies or other, like, into the space allows them to become more educated on the space themselves, whether they find out that, oh yeah, I actually belong in this group, or they're there to help and support us and vote and use their voice to help us in ways that they can, not to speak over us, but to raise our voices as well.
Yeah, and that also brings me to something else that we sort of discussed talking about, and that's how to support queer youth and the importance of protecting queer youth. I always feel like there is a responsibility, even within, and this is when intersectionality is really important, when you think about those of us who might have more privilege than others within marginalized communities, what we can do to use that privilege to ensure that we're protecting our most vulnerable, which for the LGBTQ community is queer youth and trans people of color, and how we can protect those folks to ensure that spaces are safe and affirming. And what are some things, it can be sort of any thoughts on that in general, but if there's something specific that you sort of think about that you want to do or regularly do to help support and protect and care for queer youth. And Anders, that was sort of what you were talking about, creating more spaces for kids that are safe and affirming and embracing. But anybody can start on that. Corey, we haven't heard from you in a while too.
Yeah, I can jump on that. I've got some thoughts. So I think one of the most important things that a lot of us can do is, like, we live in a society that is, powered by capitalism. Money is a thing, whether we want it to be or not. And I think putting your money where you want your support to go is important, especially if that's something that you can afford and make available to others. If you can't, there's other ways, but I think actually putting money where it needs to go is important. Just yesterday, we our local Pride group is starting to fundraise for their Pride home, and there's a lot of great people working on it. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a Pride home is, it's essentially for youth who, for example, if they make the brave decision to come out to their family, don't have somewhere that they can go if they get kicked out and don't have options. The Pride home is a place where they can go. So I think putting effort into supporting those very tangible things that other people or getting involved with yourself are doing is really important, because that is literally creating a physical space for those people with professionals who know how to build that up. So I think that's a really important part, especially if it's something that you're able to do.
Yeah, physical support when possible is definitely super important. Well, also, like, especially with minors, a lot of times we can't do physical support because they belong to their parents until they're 18. But I think being in another aspect of that, being there for the emotional support overall. But like, I have a member of my family who isn't out, so I won't say any more about who they are, but they're trans and still very young. They came out to parts of the family, and a lot of the family is Catholic and not very supportive. And I try to be there for him always. I tell him he's valid all of the time. I bought him his first binder because I knew his mom would have gotten him one, but he didn't want to ask. So he didn't ask for one. I kept like, hey, they're having a sale again. Do you want to? Oh, I'll get money eventually. So I was just like, I just bought it. I just bought it for him. And he felt, because he has so much justice for it, he's felt like just that little bit, that $30 that I spent on getting him a binder made such a big difference in his life. And just the support of being like, you are valid. Because he would tell me, I'm not really excited about this part of my transition because he's uncomfortable with the idea of Packers. And I was like, honey, you don't need to use a packer. Your transition doesn't have to look like anybody else's. If you don't want to pack, that's fine. If you don't ever want to get any particular surgery, you are still trans, you are still a man, you are still valid. No matter where you are in your transition, whether you ever do anything. I know you want to do certain things, and if you do them, you are. If you don't, that's fine. You are a valid human, and I support you 100%, my sweet little cinnamon roll. So, but like, that kind of emotional support, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in group, because sometimes kids need that one-on-one because they don't want to, in a group, talk about these sort of things, especially if you're close to a queer youth, or it's a good place to make those connections with them and make sure that they know that whatever they do and whoever they are, that they're valid and that you love them and that there's a community waiting for them. Sometimes maybe they have to get through. I've been in survival mode before. I know how to just get through and get done. And it's hard, but sometimes once you get through that, there are so many people who are there waiting for you and who love you so much already, and they don't even know you.
That was really beautiful and made me tear up again. So if anybody has thoughts, that's cool too. Goodness gracious. I really quickly want to I do want to remind everybody that all donations and bits are going to Trans Lifeline. So thank you to King Butterfree. Thank you to Max. Thank you to Kyle. This is so lovely. Everybody's so great here. This is so nice. Let's see what else. We are approaching the hour mark, so I do want to do a check-in with everybody to see how people are feeling. If we want to sort of keep chit-chatting about stuff, if you have things that you want to talk about, if you want to start winding down, it's up to y'all. This is your stream.
I'm fine with anything.
I've only drunk half my coffee, so.
Right. Well, and I've only had half my mimosa.
I have this much donut left, so
All right.
Wait a second.
Yeah, thank you, Alexis. I do want to talk about that. That kind of actually is connected to what we were just talking about, and that's sort of talking about the importance of exclusive spaces, whether that is LGBTQ only or trans only. All of those sort of exclusive spaces. Exclusive usually has sort of a negative connotation behind it. But it can be used in really positive and important ways. So I think the first thing that we can sort of talk about with this is the importance of those exclusive spaces. Have you been to any spaces like that? And did you have any sort of breakthroughs while you were there? Or perhaps it was finally the first time you just felt really safe? Or maybe you had the opposite experience. Anybody want to sort of unpack some of that?
I mean, I've never been to an exclusive space, but I do think I kind of compare it to, when you have support group meetings for addiction, those are considered relatively exclusive places for people who have all sort of had a shared experience. So they have a place to talk to people who've been where they are. And there's very little, I think, negative connotations with those spaces. And if we can just sort of take that mindset to, queer exclusive spaces, that would be, kind of the right way to treat it. It's not, we don't want you to be a part of our community. It's, we all have shared experiences and we need to be able to talk about them and help each other without input from folks who don't necessarily have the same experience or needs, for example.
Yeah. Yes, exclusive spaces can be really important especially for certain aspects of safety. I know I can't remember what the name of it is specifically, but at the Trans Expo, I think it's in New York, they'll have exclusive spaces for trans men, because other trans men will be showing off their surgery results and things, and people not in that part of the community do not belong there. They do not need, that is for people who are considering surgery or wanting to understand the aspects of that part of a medical transition. It's not for the random cis girl who decides that she just wants to show up and ogle and goggle, and being able for those people who are to feel safe in sharing that, that's deeply personal. And I think with a lot of this, it's the deeply personal things with various exclusive spaces that's important. If you're sharing your sexual experiences with someone in sort of a cathartic group presence or any kind of things that you have, having that space where you're not going to be judged in that kind of way is very important. Because we have spaces for everybody, and then we have spaces that are only for certain groups of people. And I don't ever feel left out whenever, if there's a group of gay men who are having an event, and oh, that's just not for me. I am not a gay man. That's their event. Or if there was a group of people with cancer, I wouldn't go up to that group is for them. I don't have the experience of having that. there are certain things that we've experienced that others just can't relate to.
I don't have experience being in exclusive spaces, so I can't really talk to that. But I thought both of you made really good points in that it's really important to make sure that you're looking for other people's views and just like understand other people and how they are, and to respect that they have things that are private to them as well. Especially like I know that with myself, I feel like I represent, you know, a very limited spectrum of what the queer identity is, and I always encourage people to reach out to all the other types of people that exist within the space, but at the same time also respecting what boundaries they want. Yeah.
Yeah, boundary respect and respecting people's privacy and their like not needing to have everything be for everyone's public consumption. I think we can learn from generally in society, but also like embracing the community.
There is I've just kind of been reminded of this. There is a space here that I have been interested in and then felt I could not attend. That was an exclusive. It was a gym for gay men, and I found myself in this place of feeling excluded, even though I am a man who is attracted to other men, because of the body I was born with. And so like I said earlier, I think exclusive spaces are very, very good and positive, but I do think there is also another side of the coin where some exclusive spaces tend to be, transphobic, or they could be, they erase asexuality. There's definitely that kind of line, I think, within our community of some exclusive spaces exclude people that by their definition they shouldn't, but they do anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's always a concern too with exclusive spaces, because like generally I think the very open community is a positive, but there just in certain instances where it's like we need support one-on-one or things like that. But like things that it's like, this is just a gym for gay men, like that has a lot of potential, especially if it's a business, to just exclude people just because they're afraid. Also the fear of going to the gym, even if it's not a queer gym or anything, there's lots of people that they're just worried about going to the gym body image, that adding that extra layer of anxiety to it seems a little excessive. But also you can think, well, lots of gay men maybe don't want to go to the straight gym because of this, that, and the other. There's lots of ideas back and forth.
There's certainly a history and a culture to, gay gyms specifically for gay men. And I don't want to erase or deny that that is a part of our history. And that is, a place that back in the day men created so that they could, be gay and be around people like them and flirt. And it was a safe space. And so that absolutely is important and a part of, our culture. But at the same time, there's nuances to everything.
Yeah, there's lots of ebbs and flow on all of these issues. So they can be good, they can be bad, they can be both. They're just complicated and complex issues for a lot of us.
Yeah, and I think that also brings us to the idea of, allies in spaces like that, or even allies visiting Pride. I know that can be sometimes a back and forth conversation between a lot of folks and how they feel about that, and the pushback sometimes that we see from allies who are frustrated with exclusive spaces, which is, I think part of the reason those exclusive spaces are important are because often what we see is that people like to insert themselves into whatever experience people are trying to share. That they really they want those cookies for supporting you through your journey or whatever it is, and um, and how challenging that can be because it removes the validity and the voices of those in that space. It's no longer theirs.
I think with Pride, especially, like I mentioned before, you know, I walked in Pride with my dad, and my
Yeah.
dad was an ally. And that for me, his being an ally was a huge support for me. And so I personally am like, yes, allies are absolutely welcome at Pride, but I always try to relate it back to, you know, Pride was once a riot. And if we think about that and we think about what Pride is now, Pride should be, I think, treated in a similar way that we treat protests. That if you are an ally, if you are not someone directly being impacted or affected by the thing that you are protesting, you are there as a body and as support. You are not there as a voice. You are not there to be a face. You are there to be a wall. You know, you are there to be something that they can lean on and be supported by, but you should never be the open voice or the public face of the, you know, the movement or the pride.
Yeah. Should be there to raise up the voices, not speak over them.
Exactly. And I think one of our big issues right now with society is that that's not how pride is. Right now, pride is, at least the ones that I've been to, which is it's only the one here in Indy, so I don't know what others are like, but at least the one I've been to, it is very much a spectator event. It's a spectacle. You know, most of the people who attend are not there as allies or members of the community. It's a parade for the kids. It's a big fun thing that happens. It's rainbow colors and unicorns, and so it's become a very commercial um spectator event and not a movement or a celebration or anything like that.
It's difficult to make something an exclusive space when it's held in a public space. So anything that's held in a public space is sort of not going to be able to be an exclusive space just by its very nature. But like, I think with things like Pride, welcoming into to an extent, you know, without the spectacle, no spectatorness to it, it does allow people who don't know that they're queer to see that. Because a lot of times if you shut out allies, you're actually shutting out queer people who just haven't fully realized themselves yet, because it's such a journey. So it's definitely necessary to have those kinds of public spaces and places. And like, yeah, it might be a spectacle to some of the adults that are bringing their children, but to the children, sometimes maybe they're like, what is this? They can explore the idea. They've been exposed to it. So there's good and bad to all of the things. Like, we want to have reverence for Pride and for Stonewall and all those sorts of things, but at the same time, we want to bring people in and show them I think Pride, for a lot of us, it's the remembrance of Stonewall. It's also a celebration, and it's an acceptance of ourselves for a lot of people, and it's a way of showing the outer world that we're people and that we deserve your respect, and we've come so far and we've worked so hard, and this is where we started and this is where we are now. That I think, at least with Pride, yeah, there can be a lot of spectatorship, but if they're looking at us and they're not throwing stones at us, I think there's some progress to potentially be had there. But you know, issues are complex.
I think you two said a lot of the same thoughts that I was thinking. One example that I thought could add on to that is Pride has a lot of corporate influence now, and it is really important that as that happens, I sort of see that as, if you're going to do that, make sure you're being an ally first, and actually, you know, going back to a lot of how Pride started, the historical reasons for it, and that stuff. And I just wanted to mention Google. There's lots of varying opinions about Google, but they did have a cool video which did go back to a lot of the historical things about Stonewall.
Yeah,
I
so
just thought, um, I just thought I'd mention it because if folks haven't had a chance to check it out, it is a cool way to start learning a bit more and know some of those things if you're not familiar with them.
And one thing about like all the corporatization that's coming around Pride, well, a lot of that sucks, especially when things aren't supporting it. It does sort of show how much we're becoming accepted in society, because corporations are always going to try to make money off of anything they can. The fact that we've become prevalent and supported enough that they're trying to, well, it's problematic. It's also sort of a sign of acceptance societally coming around. So like, yes, please donate to charities. But we see that you see us, which is nice, but also do better. But we see that you see us.
The fact that corporations are willing to put their efforts into profit on, I don't want to say our side, but like, rainbow capitalism means we know we're going to make a bunch of people mad, but we're going to make more money supporting this group than staying silent in support of that group. That's a good thing, because that
shows
theoretically means that our group is either bigger or just that's the side they've kind of decided to lean on. And so as frustrating as rainbow capitalism is, it is
a little bit of
sign of progress in its own twisted little way.
Yeah. I agree with so many of the things that you all just said. Also, I'm looking at chat here, and Alexis has another question, which is also connected to what we're talking about. Do you experience any difficulty telling allies that they are hindering because you are worried about losing an ally or offending someone or anything else that may go with that? And actually, I also know that just to sort of jump in on that, one of my biggest absolute pet peeves is when someone is corrected on whatever and they feel that it was a harsh correction or a harsh response, and they say and so often we see, well, I'm doing the best that I can, and you should really appreciate that. You really shouldn't be rude to people who are trying to support you, and I just don't feel like this is the space for me. And suddenly, people who are marginalized are getting tone policed, which is never good in any space. And that is like one of the most agitating pieces of ally education, is when you educate them or when you ask them to take some initiative for their own education. The number of times that we hear, well, I don't know what the A stands for. There's this really cool thing called the internet, and that's something you can Google. It's very easy. And then I don't have to spend my time explaining something to you that you can research yourself. So I think that, to me, I think that like that's my biggest issue with like sort of ally education, is that I'm not fearful of losing an ally. What I am fearful of is the amount of emotional labor that's going to go in to teaching them, and then only to have them say, this is too much. I don't get it. I don't know why you're being so mean to me. And I always just want to say, boo-who, buck up. Okay? Do your own work here. All right? What are you doing? I'm sorry.
I think a lot of the issue with that is the way internet discourse in general is. It's so reactionary and aggressive that it's hard. I do think the thing everyone really needs to learn is, if you're not a part of a thing, to raise the voices, not speak over them, like I said before. Because that's, I think if everyone could sort of get that, like, don't speak over people of color when they're talking about their experiences, highlight them, say, hey, this person has said a thing, broadcast their voice, but don't put words in their mouth, don't don't even like necessarily paraphrase unless it's like in conversation. You're saying this thing, you should go check this thing out because da 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 da. But like I think we could all do better internet discourse, internet as a whole, and all those sorts of things. And I think if we could figure that out, I think the world and the internet would be such a nicer place.
It's so true.
I only had a slightly adjacent thought, but Emma, you sort of embodied something that I think comes up a lot, where as in this space, I feel like I'm often trying to balance between sort of this queer anger that I have to like really hammer down the things that I want to see happen, but also being like, which battles do I choose and when do I sort of like force myself to like hold the peace, even though, you know, things are going on. So I find that that's a constant battle that exists for a lot of people potentially.
Choosing those battles is hard. And like, you know, I work with little kids, and my philosophy is that, you know, if it's a learning opportunity, sometimes you got to fight the battle, whether you want to or not. With kids, it's, you know, it's often a literal tantrum that you kind of have to stand your ground on. But it so often on the internet, it feels like the exact same situation, but the person you're talking to is not 4. They're, you know, possibly 14, but most likely they're 40 or older. And like, it's hard to not, at least for me, in my personal experience, it's hard not to stand my ground or get aggressive or put in that emotional labor. And at the same time, I know it's not my job to teach them all this stuff, but I have trouble backing down or like, and this is kind of what you were saying earlier, Jen, but like, I feel like if I don't at least try to put up a fight, I lose the fight. And that's not the case, but that's how I kind of feel about it.
A loss by omission.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I've struggled with, the remembering and teaching myself that I can't teach everybody everything. I can't. Some people have to learn things for themselves, and you can't teach some people some things. They have to learn it for themselves. You can't, to an extent, you can tell a child or an adult that the stove is hot, but until they touch it and learn it, they're going to always have that idea in their head that, oh no, that's not actually hot. They've lied to me. Or until they've experienced it or learned it themselves, you can only do so much. You can try to educate them. Oh no, they wanted to join and then they left.
I wanted them to join and I scared her away, and I apologize. Wanted to hold her.
Mine's actually not up my butt, which is unusual. He's usually always in here.
Sorry, cat segue.
Hey,
ooh, cats on a Segway.
For variant roles, so this is great.
Cats on a Segway sounds adorable.
Oh.
It does.
No cops at Pride, just cats on Segways.
Yes. Hell yes.
The cats will hurt us all.
Also sort of tangentially connected to what the two of you are saying, or really what the three of you are saying, is that idea of that balance between spending that emotional labor and not, and also sometimes the importance of, even if you don't quite feel like you can and you spend that labor anyway, it might not be for you, but it might be for someone else who might be reading that thread.
Yeah.
Or someone else who sees that and suddenly knows that you're a safe person, or knows that there's someone out there who will defend them if they need it, and how important that is. And that even goes all the way back to, queer youth and things that we can do with them, because so often they're lurking on the internet and they're watching all of this, or just consuming all of these interactions. And the more interactions that they can see where there are people out there who support them and who will love them, and that goes back, Jen, to your beautiful story.
Yeah.
That's so important for
definitely. definitely gotten messages from people who have seen in my real life and online and just in general online who have seen that I'm an ally in some capacity. Like in high school, I was the first person a lot of my friends came out to because they knew I was a safe space to talk to and like to explore a lot of that kind of thing. Because queerness has always been sort of in my life. I'm named after my mother's lesbian best friend from high school because she didn't. Her friend didn't think she would ever be able to have children because of the atmosphere in the 90s, the very beginning of the 90s, late 80s. She's like, I'm never going to be able to have children. So I'm sort of her namesake. But like that sort of has always been around. So it's always just been like, yeah, there are gay and lesbian people all over. So whenever I would talk about things in school and whatnot, people would come to me because this was 10 years ago before the community was so big as it is now. People would come to me and talk to me and be like, just give them that validation. So yeah, I think it's important to speak up, but also for your own mental health, know when you need to stay silent and maybe let somebody else take up that talk.
Yeah, sometimes you have to say, you know, I'm in my 20s and I've been through this fight. Let me be the voice. Let me take the hit so that someone else can, you know, benefit from it. And then sometimes you have to say, no, I can't be the one in the front lines right now. I need support from someone else. So it's very, and I don't know, for me, it's hard to be the person who says, I need help. I need you to be the voice. I need you to help me with the emotional labor in this situation. But yeah, that is as much a part of it as everything else, you know, being able to step back and let other people support you.
Yeah, that's a big thing with supporting people. Yeah. But also letting yourself be supported is very hard to do.
So hard.
Like when people, and to like take compliments, like people who have been supporting me in my chats and things, doing all the Pride events. And I'm like, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, no, I don't deserve the talking of and getting away from it. And when you're complimented, don't say, oh, no, you're wrong. Say, thank you. Accept that. And internalize it. Don't reject people's love for you. It's so difficult, but like so essential.
Yep, I completely agree. That self-care piece is really hard.
Treat yourself.
Yeah. But emotionally treat yourself.
Yes.
You know? That's the key piece. I will buy my stuff any day of the week, but it's that emotional piece that I struggle with.
Take the afternoon off and take a nap. Treat yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Vox in chat. Fear of being seen as weak. That's a huge thing, especially when it's a situation where there's always that background fear of being hurt by the other party or being attacked. Like you have to be strong, right? So
yeah,
showing any weakness or
showing any emotion,
feeling like you're going to be shown as weak is definitely a big fear.
Like the idea that if you show emotion or if you cry, they're going to perceive you as weak. Because I angry cry sometimes.
Oh, same.
If I'm so angry, I cry and I'm like, this is not the intimidating persona I need to be presenting in my angry self.
So my tears are not scary, but I wish they were.
Right. Yeah, that's hard, especially if you I emotionally process through crying, whether I'm angry or happy or sad. Like that's just, there's nothing I can do about it. This is how my body is going to react to this. And when you want to be intimidating and scary and you're yelling at them and you're just, it doesn't give off that warrior vibe that sometimes you want to give off. But again, that is connected back to these socially constructed ideas of what it means to be X or Y or Z. Mm-hmm. And in the end, they're all just boxes that prevent us from being fully formed humans. And that's frustrating.
Yeah, emotions are healthy and necessary. They're not a sign of weakness or instability. They're essential for living a life that isn't just like tense and awful. And like if you bottle that up all the time and you never get a chance to express it, you start expressing it in very negative ways. So
absolutely,
having a release for that. More people need to learn to get in touch with their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And not see them as weakness.
That's right. So one of the last things that we sort of talked about, and we can add whatever we want after this, it doesn't matter to me. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to chat and share experiences. But one of the last things we have is sort of queer representation in media, as well as like queer representation in tabletop role-playing games. Whether that is, you know, characters, you know, I think that takes us even directly to Uncaged Anthology, which, you know, amazing. Yeah. But also to characters that you create, that GMs and DMs create, and the importance of queer representation, whether it is in games or movies or comics, whatever. And if there are any thoughts on that.
So many thoughts, just trying to put them into like make sense order.
No rush. We're here. This is brunch. We're chilling.
Brunch time.
I'm really curious who everyone's first sort of character they saw in media that was a queer person. Or like the first time it was very impactful. Yeah.
Xena. Okay. That was it. 2nd grade. I saw Xena and I was like, something's happening in my body. This is amazing. Who is this person? Xena, for sure, for me.
Such a good question, and I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. It feels simultaneously pervasive and not at the same time. So I'm like, I can't see if I can pinpoint anything particular.
Because it's subtle.
Yeah, subtle in there in how it affects you personally.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of the candidates that I'm thinking of came up before I was out, and I didn't understand at the time. I think I would probably choose Nox Mensch and Sailor Uranus, and that's probably my same jam. The first time, I mean, even like in the English one that they did, it wasn't there. They washed it out, which was stupid, and I could go off on that, but that was like the first. I think it came through, and still I understood on some levels.
Why do I not know?
But see, that's important to recognize. Like, I don't actually necessarily, I can't think of someone right off the top of my head, which speaks to we need more of these characters that are impactful, that aren't subtle.
I think to me, I'm also struggling to find it, but I think it might be my Demi coming out, because I forget that impacts me so many times, because in real life in general, I can count on one hand how many people I've like really been attracted to and like wanted to date and not run out of fingers. So I'm like, why can't I think of anything? Oh yeah, I generally don't.
I'm trying to like think about like the media I engaged with as a kid, and I kind of got into this place this was in middle school, because I was one of those lucky privileged kids who got a computer in their room really early on, because my dad's a computer guy. So it was like, I have my own laptop. I have a computer in my room. I can stay up till 11 o'clock and do stuff. I latched on to fan fiction like real little, and that's kind of how I got into it. Like, it was there was like a shift of, I started reading what, you know, made sense within the context of the shows. And I think this was Pokemon, actually, of like, oh yeah, Ash and Misty, this is really cute. This is what it's like in the TV show that I watch on Saturday mornings. And then read one where Misty was a lesbian, and I went, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And like, for me, that kind of was the first time, which is not real representation, because, you know, it's being created by people who don't have representation, so they're creating their own. So I'm like, that was really my like youth and childhood. That was how I engaged with queer media, was I joined the community that made up our own, because we didn't have any.
That's right.
So I'm struggling to come up with any queer characters from that age. Like, everyone I'm thinking of that I saw and that I can like remember having a reaction to seeing them on TV was when I was a lot older.
Yeah.
And they were almost always like a side character where
Yeah.
like it was barely acknowledged, and it just like, oh, like Paranorman, which is that claymation movie where the jock character at the very end mentions that he has a boyfriend. Like for me at the time, that was huge. I thought that was the greatest thing that had ever happened and now I'm like, does that count? That was so little that they did, but it had such a huge impact because we didn't have anything better at the time.
And I'm trying to get like through what's my headcanon and what actually happened in the world is what I'm struggling with a little, because there is the one I'm kind of thinking of now, Jessica Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. There's a whole headcanon out there that she's actually Ace. And it's a great, I suggest looking it up because it is a great theory. And it was like, but also because she's not bad. She's just drawn that way. Like she's never been explicitly sexual. She's just drawn that way. And I think that might be, from an Ace perspective, not necessarily canon, but head canon. That's something that's hitting me in the brain hole right now.
I think it is wonderful that we can like look at characters and like I connect with this character, or I see things about this character and I relate to them, and so I'm going to headcanon these characters as these things. And then this like, the dark, angry, negative voice in my head goes, I bet straight people don't do that as much because they don't need to, like if we had so many more characters, would we do that as much? Because we would have representation. And I think it's wonderful that we can do that. And I love when people do that. I think it's great. But it makes me just a little sad that we have to because we don't have anything else.
Yeah. I think because a lot of the things I'm thinking of that are actual representation are much newer. I think it's getting a lot better for kids today to see these kinds of representation. Once again, going back to how corporate is starting to embrace the community, begrudgingly or not. The whole thing with The Legend of Korra, where not Nintendo, Nickelodeon wouldn't let them kiss. I feel like if The Legend of Korra was made now, they would probably allow that kiss to happen on the screen. But the fact that happened then sort of shows how far we're coming and how far we weren't fairly recently.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same example. I think the first like concrete example that I can actually think of a character that I felt like you definitely represent the queer person that I would associate with was when I watched Call Me by Your Name. And that was like super recent. That's within the past few years. Yeah, and that was a very impactful moment. I was also seeing it with my boyfriend, which made it more emotional. So yeah, too recent. Should have happened earlier, but I'm excited that all the people coming through now, all the youth coming through now, will start to get more. Should still get more representation, but starting to.
Yeah, and queer representation in media is also another indication of normalization of a lot of queer aspects.
So you mentioned that movie and it reminded me of, and I'm trying to search on Google and I can't find it. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember sitting up in my room like late at night and I found it was not an American movie. It was in some European language, Norwegian or something, like gay film about this young boy who couldn't have been more than like 14 or 15, who was a runner and falling in love with this much older guy, and they get in really big trouble, but they kiss in front of the summer camp. And I remember watching that late at night, kind of the way you would watch like porn in your room that you didn't want your parents to know about. But and it was not like porn, but it felt like it was that dirty and wrong, so I didn't want my parents to know about it. And like I remember watching it so many times thinking, oh, this is a thing, and now I'm like sitting here as a grown-up going, oh wow, that kid was really underage, and that's a really kind of creepy and inappropriate movie, and kind of vilifies, and it's not a good film. But at the time I had nothing else. Like that was a gay movie that I could find on the internet and I could watch, and that was like a representation for me. And now kids can watch Steven Universe, and they can watch Arthur, and
Yeah.
it's Arthur, right? With Miss
Yeah.
that had the wedding episode.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of kids TV that brings up, and I think probably Phineas and Ferb, just because that show's generally pretty good. A lot of TV is having like children who have gay parents and all that kind of stuff. Lots all over the place now. It's a lot more prevalent. I haven't watched children's TV for a while, and I probably won't do. I mean, I watch children's TV because I need some wholesome now and then, but I'm not in that community because I'm not a child. But I think there's a lot more representation in various ways going on now.
Yeah, and I think it also, going back to some of the things that you all have mentioned, we do have better representation now, and yet we still struggle with that sort of story of the queer sidekick who either dies or their lover or partner dies, and it's like they might be a drug addict, they might have addiction issues of any kind, and that they struggle to have what is considered like a normal life, that they are unable to fulfill the sort of idea of what a healthy, happy life is. And that was what we saw for so long, and that it's shifting now into something that's more realistic and more something that can be consumed, so that people, like young kids especially, can feel good about themselves, rather than seeing that and thinking, this is the only representation that I have, and it makes me feel bad about myself, and I haven't even figured myself out yet. And that's always something that, once you're aware that that's a representation, it's hard not to look at contemporary media and not analyze it without sort of looking for those there could be small little pieces of, like, they have some sort of, like, they had this beautiful relationship and it fell apart because one or someone died, which is horrific, that's the only representation that they see.
Yeah. A lot of times, at least back when bi representation was also a negative representation of polyamory, where it was just like, this person will just screw anyone and all around, and they can't be happy because they can't settle down into a monogamous relationship because they're dating anyone and everyone because they can be attracted to anyone. And that's annoying and frustrating.
Oh
Yeah. I love that we now have characters that have openly said not only that they're attracted to both, but they say the word bisexual.
Yeah.
Because that's only been in the last 2-3 years that people have even used that word in media. That erasure's gone on up until, I mean, it still goes on, obviously, but like in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the character of Rosa coming out and saying that she's bi, that's just such a huge thing, that she said that is what she is. She didn't just say, oh, I like both. She said the word,
Yeah, and I think so many people still consider, bisexual to be connected to the binary, when really it means I am attracted to my gender and also everybody else. It's just two groups.
The two is people who have a similar gender and people who have a different gender. That just encapsulates everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really just what feels good for you and yourself and your identity and your journey. And that's really what's key, is what fits you and your experience with yourself.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say another representation I just thought of that I think handled stuff pretty well, Lost Girl, where she's a succubus, and it doesn't matter to her what gender her partner is. She's a succubus. She just wants to get down. And she falls in love with a man and a woman. I haven't watched some of the later seasons, and I don't know how much of representation but I love Lost Girl. I use Lost Girl gifs all the time.
I was just going to say, you had mentioned when you originally sort of posed this question to us, Emma, about characters that we've created. And, you know, I have a little wizard boy that I made for a campaign that is very, very modeled after myself. He's a young trans boy, and none of the other players in this game are trans, and so it's been kind of a struggle to me to figure out how to make it, you know, that's not his character. His character is not that he's trans. That's not his story. That's not his, you know, his main goal as a character is not to learn the spell True Polymorph, but it's a part of the character. And so there's been this really kind of weird tension in line of, I want to be vocal about what his identity is. It's a part of the story. It's who the character is. I don't want to shy away from using the words or having the issues be a part of the game. And since everyone was comfortable with that, you know, we all consented to that. Let's do it. But at the same time, not making that just what he's about. I don't know. That's been a struggle for me. And I am trans, you know, so I can only imagine if you're not the identity you're trying to present in a show. You know, it's a tough line to write it in the right way, which is probably why sensitivity writers are a thing, and more people should use them.
Yeah, I feel that in my life in general, because I'm not my sexuality. It is a big part of me, but it isn't everything that's a part of me. Like I had a group at one point wanted to like call the adventure like something involving queer, and it was like, I mean, yeah, but I am queer, but like that's not all that I am. I am an amalgamation of a million things. That is an important part, but that is not the defining characteristic of my life. So it's a thing I definitely want to embrace and talk about but also I'm a writer, and I'm a person who does these things and that thing, and it's finding the balance of feeling like, am I overdoing it in my sexuality talking? Because am I making myself uncomfortable? Because maybe I am.
Yeah. I mean, what I want more than anything in the world is like a action movie, science fiction, big robot explosion adventure, and the main character is gay.
Yeah.
And it's not the plot.
Mm-hmm.
They just are, the way how in every other big action movie, whatever, the characters are straight and they just are, you know?
Yeah.
I want to get to the point where that's representation. It's not, you know, here's a gay action movie. Here's an action movie, you know?
Here's an action movie that happens to have queer people in it.
Yep.
100%. Since Anders brought it up, do Corey or Jen, do you have any characters that you have made that might be perhaps you creating a version of yourself that is connected to your gender or sexuality, or are there particular times where you are consciously or unconsciously thinking about representation at your table, stuff like that?
I think with characters, definitely, like Bunny, who I did for the Mad Mage, she is definitely an expression of my peak feminine side. Like, I love Legally Blonde and all of those kinds of things, but that's not necessarily something I present about myself. So that was definitely a way of exploring that super femme side and being like, oh my goodness. But she was like still like a good character. She wasn't like stereotypical afraid of spiders or like, ew. And like, she was just like, everybody is full of love and light, and this is amazing. She was just like a beacon of support, and super femme wearing all pink and all that kind of things that tend to make me uncomfortable. And I've had like experimented with characters. I had a Kenku named Kenku who was a little bit of a crazy bird, a little bit out of his mind, and they used they, them, or he, him, and was just sort of like very like, because he clearly had been into the spirit world. He was a druid, so he was very flowy and fluid, and I felt like that was a exploration of that part of me. And I always, whenever I bring players to the table, I always try to look for queer inclusion and people of color inclusion, POC inclusion, whenever possible. Like trying to not just making space for them, but encouraging people to come in. I know I saw on Twitter a while back at a store, there was a man who saw two girls standing at the back, and then rather than just saying, oh yeah, girls are allowed to come in, he invited them in. He invited them to sit down and hang out and play. So sort of not just making the space for them, but also inviting people into the space and making it available when possible, whenever there are people to be found. How do you make friends?
If you figure out the answer to that question, let me know.
I will. I'll let the world know.
Yeah. I mentioned that I always end up in two characters for some reason. I'm just not creative enough to go outside of that, but those characters have always been queer. I can't think of one that wasn't. And I enjoy that. It is sometimes I find it, I want to really make sure that if I'm going outside of the gender that I feel like I represent, or the queer sexuality that I feel like I represent, that I'm doing it in a really respectful way. And that's always important to me. I do have for example, Alice, our Invisible Sun character. I've slowly discovered that I think she is best described as the big sword lesbian, because
Nice.
That's who she's become, and I really enjoy it. But I also want to make sure that this is something that's different than who I am. I want to make sure I'm accurately representing it and being really respectful. So that's something that I think about a lot. And I have made characters that are like myself. I once made a barbarian, and I went on the internet and searched for attractive buff models, and I basically made them me, but a model. Yeah. So that was fun. Yeah, and so I do feel like each of the characters has parts of me, but I like to also include other parts of other people, especially in the queer space.
I feel like D&D, or just role-playing in general, is me, but really, really attractive. At least, not all the time, but like, I don't know. I've had a player tell me that all my NPCs are hot, and I'm like, yeah, probably, because I get to play them, and I want to be seen as hot.
Kenku was a Kenku, but he was most beautiful burb. He had 20 in charisma, most beautiful, shiny, beautiful burb.
Yeah. I don't know how people can dump charisma.
For me, it was an interesting character choice because he was a druid, so I should have dumped wisdom, but it was a pre-roll, and he already had super high, so I was like, well, we're going all in on this charisma. He's not going to be casting spells. He's going to be talking his way out of every situation, and he loves shiny things. He's a magpie. He's going to be effervescent. It's going to be beautiful.
I make characters that dump charisma if I'm going to be playing in a game where I know my nerves are going to get a hold of me, because then I have an excuse to be super socially awkward in the game.
Feel that so hard.
Yeah.
Gotta get all that.
To answer my own question, also Knox, I saw that you asked as well. Yeah, I've totally made characters that either are helping me work through sort of gender sexuality stuff, but also that all of my characters are an extension of myself, for sure. And they're all sort of working through some facet of my person. I would say the ones that stand out to me the most, Mix Magpie in Dragon Heisters on Dice Priory on Tuesdays. She is definitely as shady and awful as she is. She's absolutely helping me work through some of my own gender sexuality stuff. And I would also say, and I haven't used her in any campaign that I have that I have streamed, but my the very first D&D character that I ever made, who's a warlock, and her name is Lady Bones. She is definitely, she's this queer, likes to think really highly of herself, and ultimately does something incredibly awkward or silly or stupid. And she is always just trying to figure herself out and figure out where she fits in the world. She would also be another one of, yep, that's right. She would be probably the other one, but those are the two that I can think of. Mixed Magpie for sure is the most recent. That is, she's my girl. I do love her, as bad as and awful as she is.
On it, I think all of my characters have probably been some degree of ace. I'm like, alrighty then. That's a thing I do. Now that I've thought about it.
Yeah, I think all of mine are queer in some way. I'm trying to think of one that isn't, and I'm failing. So be the representation you want to see in the world.
That's right.
Be it yourself.
Yep. All right. Well, we are reaching our 2-hour mark. I think this was really wonderful. If anyone has some closing thoughts before we start doing some outros, please feel free to share them now. If anybody has anything.
Lovely and a great time. And you guys here that I'm talking to, and then everybody in chat are all really, really wonderful.
Yeah, everybody's great. You're all valid. I'm feeling extremely socially awkward because it's how I do. So if I said anything weird or if there's anything I can do better, please feel free to tell me. Tell me if I've strayed, and if I need to tell me if I need to do better. Tell me what.
Yeah, I would mimic that. If there's anything for myself as well that I could do better, I am totally open to constructive feedback and learning and improving on all things.
Yeah, same. I think that unpacking is, and learning to better yourself and evolving is a constant situation. And being willing to do that is the most important step. Being open and willing to learning. That's key. So thank you all so much for being here with us. I'm going to have us go in reverse order to do some outros. You can tell us who you are again, where we can find you, any other closing thoughts that you might have, and any projects or interesting stuff that you have, any games you have coming up, all of that. We want to hear all of those things. So I think that means, Jen, that you are Corey. Jen, Corey, I don't remember.
I think I went last at the beginning.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna go. So I'm Jen. I'm randomly generated across the internet here on Twitch and on YouTube. I'm randomly Jen on Twitter because character limits, and it's randomly generated JENN because that's my name instead of GEN, and randomly JENN on Twitter. I've had a super fun time right now. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff for Pride, working with Mid-Boss, playing games, stream 4 days a week, sometimes 5. If I pick up a stream on Monday, I stream at noon Central. So I'd love it if you would all come hang out and spam those beautiful, beautiful Pride emotes because they're great. I've seen a lot of talk about trying to get them permanent, petitions and stuff like that. Yeah, oh, and I have a project I'm working on soon. It's going to be, I want to do a Fiasco project where I stream Fiasco with people. So I'm going to be looking for players for that because Fiasco is such a fun game and there's so many different play sets that I'm going to be getting some groups together and hopefully occasionally regularly play in some fiascos. So keep an eye on my Twitter if you'd like to join in that. I'll be picking people probably pretty soon, putting out the thing. But thank you for so much for running this, Em.
Thank you for being here and sharing.
It's been
all
a spectacular time.
This was great.
You're all valid, and I love you.
Corey, I think that you're up.
Awesome. My name is Corey Hickson. I just posted my Twitter in the chat, so same name. I was really happy to join in on this, and thank you, Emma, for doing a lot of the show running, putting things together. Also, thanks to Alexis, who ran production for us. That was really great. So tonight we've got Invisible Sun. Super excited for that. Alice, Big Sword Lesbian, has got some cool things to do, and we've got some great stuff coming up. I've also, as of today, I've got the Pride Collection, which is 5 different tabletop games. And I'm also super nervous about releasing this and sharing it with the world, because anxieties about sharing things that you've made that were deeply personal is extremely scary. So I'd really appreciate anyone who checks that out. If there's things that you want to see improved in it, I will do whatever it takes to get it to where people think it's fantastic and amazing. As well, for June, all of the proceeds for that are going to go to Trans Lifeline, which is our charity. So we've got that going on. Otherwise, I think that's me, and I was really glad to participate in this, and thanks to all the cast here who showed up and shared so much of what they had to share.
Thank you. That's wonderful and awesome. Anders?
Yeah, I'm Anders. You can follow me on Twitter at Anders_D_K, or on Twitch at Hats, Cats, and Clerics. I don't have my own Twitch, but I have this little community Twitch that I am the creative director for. And we do have a Discord, and we're a small community, but we're very low pressure. We play community games. We get together and we play Minecraft and like Jackbox games and stuff. Very queer friendly and new player friendly. We're actually, at some point, I will get my life together and I'll put together the application form and post it on the Twitters, but we're going to begin casting for a Monster of the Week campaign called Legend Has It, which will hopefully air right after Gen Con, so like the second week of August, which will be sort of exploring world legends and lores, and what if they were all real and the same group of monster hunters had to deal with them, a la Supernatural, but a lot more inclusive and not starring a bunch of white men. So hopefully I'll get some info about that later. But yeah, thanks for watching. And I just want to repeat all the sentiments about how great you guys are and all the thank yous and everything.
That campaign sounds dope. Dope as hell.
All right. And I am Emma. You can find me at MK Hansen on Twitter. I want to have some quick special shout outs. Thank you to Knox and Alexis for this beautiful and whimsical and wonderful overlay that I'm obsessed with.
I'm a waffle.
It's amazing. It's perfect.
I decided I'm a Danish.
And thank you to Alexis for running tech. Thank you to Corey for helping organize this as well. And thank you to everybody at Variant Roles for giving the space to do something like this, and for being here and supporting us. That's been so wonderful. And thank you 3 for being here and sharing your thoughts and your experiences and your voices. This was so wonderful and important, and I think that it was a great way to kick off June. Which leads me to, okay, there's so much stuff happening at Variant Roles in June. A reminder that all donations, all bits from all community games will be tallied at the end of the month, and all of that will be going to Trans Lifeline, which is a wonderful 501c3 organization that provides resources for trans individuals, and it's the first trans lifeline, trans hotline that has existed ever, and that's really wonderful. So thank you to everybody who donated today: King Butterfree, Cam, Kyle, I'm forgetting someone because I'm panicking right now. Max. Thank you. Yep, there it is. So every Saturday, there will be something like this, whether it will always be Pride Brunch, but it might sort of shift around and change depending on what we decide to do. And on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., there will also be Pride community games and events. So keep an eye on the Variant Rules Twitter to stay on top of that. There's a lot of new stuff happening. They're wrapping up Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Ravnica starts on Monday, which is really exciting. It starts at 7 Eastern. Thursdays, there's still the MCG mixtape that's happening. Saturdays today, Saltmarsh will start next week. I will be running a Saltmarsh campaign, so expect that to be gay and fun. And also in the evenings, we still have Invisible Sun, as Corey mentioned. And tonight, there will be 2 guests. We have Alex Katu, who will be here, as well as Jordan. I'm going to try to pronounce your name correctly. I believe it was like
Shively.
that.
Yes, that
No,
was,
it's definitely just the void.
that was the pronunciation guide you were given. So.
That was what I was told. So please join us tonight at 9. That's going to be really exciting and wonderful. Sundays, we will have a goth brunch that will start next. No, is it next weekend? I think it's next weekend. That will be at 12 noon. I will be in that as well. It's going to be really wonderful and exciting. Can't wait. It's going to be an amazing campaign run by Kyle. And as always, Urban Shadows at 8 p.m., which is wonderful. And for me, you can also find me on Tuesdays at Dice Prairie playing Mixed Magpie. And I think that's it. And if I have forgotten
stuff.
Oh, sorry. There's so much stuff and it's all amazing. Follow everybody's Twitter to see what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. I think if there are no more closing thoughts, I think we did it. We did our first Pride Brunch. Thank you, everybody. This was so wonderful. Have a lovely day. Enjoy.
Happy Pride.
Yeah, Pride.
Kind to one another. You're all valid and we love you. Be gay, do crime.